the AHAAH algorithm, which outputs ARUs, number of exposures, and dB. Not only looking at just that one peak dB, but looking at full spectrum attenuation.
Welcome to the Baffled podcast by Ridgeline Suppressors, where we hope to be able to get into discussing everything we've got on our minds, things that are going on in current events, and let you draw your own conclusions.
We'll definitely discuss the firearm industry a little bit.
I'm probably going to get into a little bit of farming and agriculture.
I mean, you can't talk about anything without talking about politics at some level, right?
Yeah, and then probably some education, some economics.
Yeah, so basically all the things.
Everything we have on our minds. I'm Megan Roybal.
And I'm Matt Roybal. We're the owners of Ridgeline Manufacturing and Ridgeline Suppressors. We're parents to 6 kids. We do everything from farming to hunting to fishing, and obviously we're business owners and entrepreneurs.
All right, that being said, let's get into it. Welcome back to Baffled.
All right, today we've got a really fun podcast for you guys. We're going to be talking about the most asked question that we ever get when either online in social media or at shows, and that's,
what's your DB, man?
what's your DB? So before we get into that, though, we have to go through Megan's favorite part of the podcast, which is the baffled fact of the show? Of the day.
I don't know.
No.
Can you baffle me? Do you have a good one?
You're always baffled by me. So my baffled fact is that George Washington was the only president in U.S. history up to this point to ever take battle as commander-in-chief. So to ever take the field as commander-in-chief while he was president.
Okay. Do you know when that was? When he took the field?
I don't know exact dates, but we were obviously a very young country. George Washington was the first president. And it was over taxation. So it's really interesting because they had essentially fought the Revolutionary War over just taxation and being, they were very anti-taxation, we'll put it that way, right? And as most of us are, nobody likes paying taxes. But they were a young country. They had to figure out how to pay their debts, how to pay for things. And they were so anti-taxation that written in the Constitution, they essentially had no way until 1913 to tax private property and private income. So they couldn't just tax us like they do now, right? So they put an excise tax on whiskey, of all things. Who'd have thought that? And in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, they used whiskey basically as currency. They traded with it. They paid for things with it. And so this excise tax on whiskey caused a huge rebellion and uprising. And so George Washington marched with, I don't know how many thousand, but it was a few thousand troops, and there was a few thousand people gathered together that were rebelling against this excise tax. He shows up. They actually didn't have to fight. He was able to calm the situation down, came back to Washington. Or where was it wasn't Washington, wasn't the capital, but yeah, so he comes back to the capital was in Pennsylvania, comes back to the capital, and they shortly after that repealed the tax. So he worked a deal without having to kill any of these new Americans, right? Which would have been bad. But it's super interesting, and it's just a really interesting dynamic. We're still in July right now, the 250th anniversary, and it's like they fought this war over these things that they were very concerned with, and they were very legitimate about what their beliefs, and they stood by them, you know?
Yeah.
And to see how far we've come today in 2026, it's a totally different situation when it comes to taxation, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
You know.
So, okay, thanks for baffling me with that American history. Are you ready for mine?
Sure. Should I be scared?
I don't know. Do you know what a cephalopod is?
No.
Okay, well, I'll tell you in a minute. Did you know that cephalopods, armadillos, naked mole rats, and spiders do not have, well, they're considered deaf for all intents and purposes, because cephalopods, which is like an octopus,
Okay.
and spiders and naked mole rats, they sense vibrations instead of sound. And armadillos can hear a little bit, but for all intents and purposes, they're deaf, which I think is why they get run over so much. I don't know. That's just my assumption there, but I thought we'd do a little something on hearing.
Cephalopods, not to be confused with encephalitis, right?
I mean, you could confuse the two, but it might make all the conversations a little weird.
All right. So a cephalopod is deaf. So basically, you don't have to listen to the rest of the podcast, because go buy a suppressor so you don't become a cephalopod.
Don't be an octopus.
Exactly.
Okay, I think
right.
we're done here. Bye.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, so what's your DB, man? Why do we need to nerd out on this?
Well, I'm super excited that you're letting me nerd out on it. And so I'm sure you'll stop me a few times during this conversation.
I had to make notes.
Yeah. And so first, let's start with just like, what is dB? What is a decibel? And kind of not necessarily like the technical definition of it, but essentially it's gain. So anytime you have a oscillation, a wave, which is sound is a sound wave. It's a pressure wave moving through a medium. In this case, it's air, because we live in an atmosphere of air, and it's a physical pressure wave pushing and oscillating. And with that wave, you have a certain frequency and a certain amplitude. And so the frequency is how fast, what the amount of time it takes it to make one cycle, to go up, back, down, right? So
And that would be like high note versus low note.
right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the tone. The amplitude is what is measured in dB, and that's how loud it is. So that's how high the wave is going.
Okay.
Right. So like on the ocean, when you have waves, it's like riding that 20-foot wave or whatever would be the amplitude, or you could actually put that, I don't know if they do in ocean waves, but like you could technically put that into dB if you have some scale. And so dB is a gain, right? So for human hearing, 0 dB is zero for us.
Can't hear.
You can't hear it.
That's
right?
baseline.
Right. Yeah. And so, but there may be animals like you were talking about, that you were talking about deaf ones. There's some that could hear what we can't hear.
You think about a dog whistle, like so high that it's not necessarily.
So that's outside of our frequency range, right?
Okay.
But there's probably, and even people, 0 dB is probably like some average that they came up with, right?
Right. No,
because like some people can hear better than others.
Yeah, my
right?
kids can't hear anything
So, like,
I say, no matter what. So
like if I were to take a hearing test, I bet mine is probably not 0 dB. I probably can hear like at, I don't know, 5, 10. I don't know what the number is.
Yeah.
But it's essentially a gain. It's a scale
Okay.
of like 0 is you can't hear it, and then you start going up louder and louder and louder and louder.
Okay.
And you eventually get to a damage threshold.
Wait, this is not linear. Like you're saying so
it's a logarithmic scale.
right. So it's exponential. So every one increase on this dB is actually times 10.
Correct.
Yeah. So a whisper, babbling brook wind through the trees, that's going to be 30 dB. The average human conversation, just voices, not a raised voice, is going to be 60 dB, which doesn't mean it's twice as loud. It means it's 30 times louder. And so based on that scale, then when we get into damage range, 100 is going to be like really loud music, a rock concert. 125 is going to be 15 minutes at 125 decibels. You are looking at hearing damage.
Right. And so you bring up a good point. In like 15 minutes, you get hearing damage, right?
Right.
And so the amount of time that you're exposed to a certain level of exposure, sound exposure, it's gonna either give you damage or not give you damage, right? And so that's where you can get into the difference between like a steady state sound or a impulse sound, right? And so for example, a steady state sound is going to be like your white noise in the background, like the air conditioner
Yeah,
running
we've
or
got
your
this
heater
air
running.
blowing, and it's the same tone. It never stops. It's
Yeah,
always
it's
the same.
just continuous. So that would be just a steady state, same frequency, same amplitude. It's just steady state.
Okay, which can be annoying, but doesn't really, as long as it's low decibels, is not going to affect your hearing necessarily.
Right, but what you were saying, like if you're at 120 dB and you hear that steady state sound at that amplitude for X
15,
number
20
of
minutes.
time,
Right.
15, 20 minutes, then you will start to receive damage.
Okay.
Right? And so this all comes down to the system that we're looking at, the system we're trying to analyze, and the sensor or the receiving side of that is the human ear.
Right.
Right. And so everything that we're doing is going to be trying to, everything that we're looking at in terms of engineering and physics is going to be related to what that receiver actually is able to comprehend.
And so when we talk about dBs in relation to our receiver, our ear, essentially our ear is more complex than dB reduction alone can address. Or did I say that right? Our ear and our auditory processing is more complex than just reducing decibels.
Absolutely. And so she's getting into now, like, okay, everybody asks about dB when it comes to suppressors. And the reason that is because the industry has taught them to ask about dB. And I think it's because maybe it was the easiest thing to bring up. Maybe the industry wasn't quite advanced enough to understand the difference. I mean, I don't know all the reasons.
Quantifiable. You can put a number to it, which people like. People like to see data that's understandable. And if it was the only data available, then it becomes industry standard. Oh, my dB is this. My reduction is this.
And when you have a small sample set, so like if you don't have a lot of suppressors on the market, or if they're just like kind of all just at this level of technology, then I can see that happening as well. Like it's just, okay, unsuppressed gun is 165 to 170 dB. Ours knocks it down by 30 dB, and which is
industry standard is 25 to 40.
Right. But essentially, in nature, there is never a single frequency tone. It's always a compilation of a bunch of different frequencies. And that's what you hear, and that becomes what we recognize or what we describe as tone. And so the tone of a musical instrument, the tone of somebody's voice, all of that sound that our brain can recognize and identify as a guitar or a trumpet or your voice or my voice is because you have all these frequencies that are compiled together. Like everybody's vocal cords makes a unique sound, right?
Right.
A unique set of frequencies, and you have your main tones for the different words. So in English, right, those are the tones that we sound out to make these different words,
right? And
we can recognize those dominant modes. But those all the other modes that are in there are what are making it distinguishable and making it tone.
Your voice.
Yeah, your voice. And so you can essentially use the same description of a suppressor. And so you have a amplitude, so you have a peak that happens, but you also have all this other frequency content that's going on. And you have to look at the whole system. You can't just look at the peak. You have to look at all of the rest of that frequency content. And so one of the ways that you could explain this is if you're driving down the road in a car, and so let's not talk about like our new vehicles that are super quiet and super comfortable.
This is Grandpa's truck.
Yeah, let's talk about like the 72 Ford, right? Okay. That you're rolling down and you can hear all the wind noise. You got a lot of road noise, even on pavement, right? And so all of that normal noise you're hearing is just like that steady state content of exposure and excitation happening from the wheels rolling on the ground to the wind blowing through past the cab.
Yeah.
So you're cruising down the road, you got that, but then you hit a pothole, right?
Especially if you're in New Mexico.
Right.
You're definitely gonna hit a pothole.
Yeah. You'll hit a lot of potholes. Every bridge you cross will feel like you fell into whatever you were trying to cross. But yeah, exactly. those are impulses, right? So like when you hit that pothole, that's an impulse, and it's typically a higher amplitude than your steady state stuff, but it's a much shorter duration of time.
Yeah.
It's a very short. And so let's say you were on the road for 2 hours, right? And you're in this super loud truck, you hit 2 potholes the whole time, or in the case of a firearm discharge, you hit 1 pothole.
Yeah.
Actually, you hit 2 because there's the main and then there's typically a ground reflection that comes back.
Okay.
But you hit these 2 potholes over this 2-hour period of time. So the dB essentially is just telling you about the pothole. But for anybody who's taken a long drive in one of these types of vehicles, you know that like you actually get tired from all of just the noise and the exposure, and you probably honestly don't even remember the pothole.
No.
Right? And so dB is only telling you about this one peak and this one pothole. And that's why it's a problem in really defining a solution for a system. And that brings us to like what we were trying to do. So the excitation, so it's a journey, right? The excitation is the gunshot. The destination is your ear.
Right.
And the goal of this journey is to make it as safe and as quiet for your ear as possible. And so the thing in the middle of those two, the highway, is the suppressor.
And I distinctly remember the day that you walked into the house and said, "Do we know any audiologists?" And I had no idea what was going on. I thought maybe you thought you were losing your hearing. I thought this was a medical question.
I was definitely losing my hearing. I mean, I've been around guns my whole life. I work in a machine shop. So yeah, I was definitely losing my hearing.
Yeah.
But that's not why I was asking. Because I wanted, from an engineering perspective, it's always exactly like I said. Okay, here's my excitation. Here's my receiving sensor, which in this case is the human ear. What stimulates it? What do I need to know about that in order? I need to understand what my sensor is in order to know what I need to attenuate.
Right.
Right. And so a suppressor is essentially an acoustic attenuation device or an acoustic impedance device. Right. And so both of those words are something that stop, slow down. They essentially take that dB, that higher peaks, and they flatten the curve. They lower all of those out.
Okay.
They're filters. And so I wanted to understand what the human ear could do. And as I started to do that, at the very basic one, it's 3 components. You've got your outer ear, middle ear, inner ear. All 3 of them serve a very particular function. They all work together. But your outer ear is what you see and your ear canal up to your eardrum.
Yeah.
And the shape of the ear canal helps attenuate sound. So really low frequency, high amplitude sounds aren't going to get into your ear canal.
Essentially, the thread's too big for the needle.
Yeah, so like a pressure wave coming off of like an explosion, for example, may not necessarily get into your ear. You feel it in your head and everywhere else. So
right.
it's not good to be exposed to it. Right. But you're not going to necessarily, it's not going to get into your ear because your canal's going to filter out, ear canal's going to filter out quite a bit of that. The next portion of that is your eardrum, which your eardrum is a mechanical device. So up until this point, so the ear takes an analog signal, so a mechanical signal, and it turns it into an electrical signal. That's what your ear is doing. It's taking sound waves, which are pressure, and turning them into electrical waves, which your nervous system then transfers to the brain.
Okay.
So that's what it does from a technical perspective. How it does that? Ask a doctor.
I mean, you're not headed there next. Just go for the medical degree.
No.
Okay.
No. I've avoided biology at all costs, but here we are.
Oh, okay. But really funny. I'm going to scroll really fast because Matt cannot handle anything gross. Like, we have animals, we have kids. Gross stuff is constantly happening at our farm and in our house. And last night I was reading an All About Your Body book to our sons, and one is 6 and one is 2. And the 6-year-old is totally engrossed in it. Like, he is loving, and it's meant for kids. It's a kid's book. The 2-year-old climbs up in my lap, listens to like half a page and looks at the drawings and goes, ew, and goes right back over to dad. He was having nothing to do with it. And so that is how Matt feels about all things biology.
I agree.
Ew.
I agree with the 2-year-old. I mean, I grew up farming and ranching and hunting, and so like animals, not a problem. People, not a fan. Ew. So, but like so back on course here.
Sorry, I just had a squirrel. Okay.
All right. So we're at the eardrum, and the eardrum does kind of the same thing as the ear canal, but it transfers some of that sound, and it takes that higher amplitude, that lower frequency sound, and it vibrates, and it creates a drum essentially.
Yeah.
And creates a signal. So it also filters out some of that pressure wave though. And the reason that you're filtering all this is because you're trying to protect that inner ear, which is the very sensitive portion of the ear. And
which is cochlea, which is bone and hairs and fluid.
Right. And so that's where the magic happens, where it actually, that bone vibrates.
Yeah.
And creates a lighter vibration that then vibrates those nerve endings, those hairs, that those turn it into an electrical signal, right? And so those are what get damaged. Those are what cause tinnitus. Those are what cause gaps in your hearing.
Okay.
And so essentially tinnitus is a frequency gap in your hearing that you've lost for some reason. And your brain is trying to figure out how to fill that gap. And so you get tinnitus, right? Again, I don't know exactly why, don't know exactly how. If any of you guys are audiologists,
yeah, drop us a link in the comments.
Let us know. We'd love to have you on and discuss this more in detail. Like the details about how all that works is actually super interesting, but it's somewhat not necessarily relevant as much as what frequencies are causing these things to get out of bounds, right? And so
then how do we take this, like understanding the ear, understanding the gunshot, and translate that back to your filter, your suppressor?
Right. And so that's exactly what I was trying to do when I first started designing suppressors, is I was like, how do I validate this? And that's when I did the deep dive on the interweb and looked at everything, and I got on the line and was like, I don't know. There's no good industry standards. They're talking about dB, and of course I come from a mechanical engineering background where I've done a lot of vibration analysis. I understand what dB is, and I'm looking at it, I'm saying that doesn't tell you anything. And that's where we went down this whole road. And so I started trying to figure out, how do we find out? There has to be a model, and that's when I started talking with doctors.
What's happening?
And the doctors understood it, but they didn't have necessarily a way to model. And I started thinking to myself, I'm going to have to come up with a way to model the human ear.
There goes that medical degree.
Well, yeah, and then actually, luckily enough, I didn't have to, because it had already been done by the Army Research Laboratory with the AHAAH.
What's the AHAAH?
So the AHAAH,
I think you should sound really excited every time you say it.
or a light bulb, it's an algorithm that was developed by the Army Research Laboratory. It stands for Auditory
Hazard Assessment
Algorithm for Humans.
Okay, can I squirrel again?
Sure.
All right, did you know that in the 1990s, there was something called the Albuquerque Project? Don't look at me like you already know this. Pretend to be surprised. Pretend to be baffled.
I'm baffled.
And they had a mil-spec that was trying to predict how noise was affecting hearing and what the requirements were for various occupations within the military, for what they could be exposed to, and the safety gear that would go with it. And they realized, they were starting to recognize that there was a disconnect there, and the information that they had and the requirements they had set were not actually protecting personnel the way they wanted them to. And so they set this Albuquerque project at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, where they had to test on people.
So she's so excited about this because, if you guys don't know, we we are in New Mexico. We're just outside of Albuquerque. We do a lot of we do work with like on base and stuff. So it's like
Okay,
that's
so
why she's so excited.
This
about
is why I'm so excited. So, Kirtland Air Force Base had testing with people because they did not have an algorithm for it yet, and through this testing, recognized that their mil spec was only about 38% accurate, and this led to
So the methodology for validating the mil spec was only about
38% accurate. Thank you for nerding out on that.
Yeah, any mil spec says, okay, here's what you have to be able to do. Here's what you have to be able to withstand, right? And with that is a testing methodology or a validation method that goes along with the mil spec, regardless of what it is, whether it's 810G in the mil spec she's talking about is 1474. So they tell you, okay, here's what you have to achieve, but here's a methodology for testing it. And so what she's talking about is they had 1474, which is exposure, it has to do with acoustic exposure. And they figured out that the validation methods that they had in there that they were currently using were only 38% accurate.
And that led to a research project through the Army Research Laboratory that then developed the AHAAH.
The AHAAH.
Okay, so we can unsquirrel now. I thought that was a fun one.
I don't even know where we were after that story. So essentially the AHAAH, they created an algorithm that models the human ear, that digitizes the human ear, that we then can take a digitized acoustic signal, like one recorded from a microphone of a firearm discharging, and plug it into this algorithm in MATLAB or Octave in a software, and we can now determine what the risk exposure is, and it has a much higher accuracy than previous methodologies.
And recognizes the risk of both frequency and amplitude.
Yeah, it looks at duration of exposure. It looks at all of that frequency content. So the AHAAH algorithm doesn't just look at peaks. It looks at that whole frequency content. And what we're trying to do is, so when somebody asks me about dB, I tell them, well, here's the dB, but it kind of doesn't mean anything. But at the same time, it's this whole, I guess, education thing that we have to do to be able to say, like, okay, here's why it matters. Here's why the rest of that frequency content matters. And a lot of what we talked about is why, right? It's not just this one single tone. It's not just this one single number that can define it. And so the AHAAH looks at that, all that frequency content, and it gives you metrics. And so one of those metrics is dB. It is how high, what is your max amplitude of this impulse?
Okay, so if it's measuring it, what's your dB, bro? How do our cans measure up side by side with some of the top cans on the market?
We're as high as everybody else. We're in the 30 to 40 dB range, depending on rifle, but again, like even that. So this is a whole nother aspect that we really haven't talked about, but the testing methodology that goes along with this. So the dB of the suppressor can be affected by everything about the rifle.
And everything about the testing system.
The cartridge, the barrel length, the barrel size, the like what the muzzle velocity is, how much powder you're burning. All of these things, what's the weight of the rifle? All of these things can affect that. And so that's why that number, like this, I can take the same suppressor, whether it be mine or somebody else's, put it on different guns, and it's going to have a different dB rating. So to say, for me to advertise a single dB rating, I honestly don't even want to do it, because it's okay. And where we have listed these dB ratings, I tell you exactly what the gun was. I tell you exactly what the ammunition was. And that way you can kind of start to infer. And there are groups out there that have started to take this and started to make databases of different firearms with different cans to try to get this comparison, right? And that's a good thing. But
we want to move this in a safer direction. That's where
Right.
we want the industry standard to step up.
yeah, and so we have to look at not just dB, we have to look at frequency content, and you have to look at full spectrum attenuation. And if you've been at our shows, you will have seen that I talk about this, and when somebody asks me about dB, I tell them that, and then they glaze over and go somewhere else. Usually, no, not always, but like I put it on our shirts, and the reason it matters is because a spectrum, right, is a compilation of frequencies, and it's like you have to look at the full spectrum of the acoustic signature, which is what we do, which is what the AHAAH does. So the AHAAH really is just a validation methodology. It
Right.
doesn't tell you how to make a suppressor, doesn't tell you anything about the suppressor. All it's doing is giving you a standard, a metric system and a way to validate.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed. And so out of there, you get dB, you get ARUs, which are auditory risk units.
Which you'll
is,
see if it's on like our paperwork and our website, you'll see
Yeah.
an ARU, and most people have no idea what that is.
Right. And so the lower the ARU, the better. The lower the risk of damages. And so,
But then there's also an exposure rating.
right. And so then there's also a number of exposures.
Yeah.
And so that's going to tell you, you can be exposed to this impulse X number of times over X period of time. And so, for example, like you may be able to be exposed to this 30 times in an 8-hour period or in a
Okay.
4-hour period. And this all starts to make sense when you start to look at why the Army did this. And it's because they're using it to validate not only like small arms fire, artillery, cannons, all of this stuff, but also just being in an aircraft in a cockpit for a certain
Yeah,
amount of
heavy
time.
equipment is loud.
And so, like, how do you validate the hearing protection, right? That's what they're looking to try to do.
Yeah.
Well, a suppressor is just a safety device. It's a hearing protection device. It doesn't go on your ear. It goes on the source rather than on the receiver. So then that's why, okay, you can be exposed to this for 4 hours this many times, right? And so when it comes to impulses, what we found was that, like you mentioned earlier, RDB is basically right up there with everybody else's, up there at the top of the best suppressors. But the number of exposures and that our ARU was much we didn't start there. We designed cans to be that our ARU is much lower and our number of exposures is much higher.
Like sometimes 100 times higher or more.
Right.
Like-
And so like the closest ones we found was like on a tactical suppressor, on an AR-15 platform.
Our tactical suppressors, the arm.
Yeah, you might see something that has like 20 exposures, right? A
Yeah.
suppressor. Our suppressor was 40 to 50 to 60 in some cases.
Wow.
And so we were 2 to 3 times that. And when you got into some of the bolt gun stuff, our suppressors were hundreds of times more. And so that's where, okay, and the difference is you can hear the difference. So that's why I like going to shows and I like going to the range, because I could talk about all this and you might say, I don't care, dude, because like I don't care what your ARU say, I don't care what your number of exposures is, like it still sounds loud. It doesn't. And so that's how I know it works.
Yeah.
Right? Is because they sound better. Your dB still might be close to the same, but fun fact is that like the speed at which the rise and fall of that peak, which is the dB peak that people are measuring, is fast enough that most of that is not getting into your inner ear. Most of that is not most of that gets filtered out by the eardrum. Like I was saying, remember, it's a mechanical system, can only respond so fast.
Yeah.
And so it's going to essentially filter out a lot of that. And it's not causing tinnitus. It's not causing the damage that we get from shooting guns.
So we had like the best advertising moment ever over the 4th of July. We set up a shooting lane at our local gun range, and people came out and shot, and it was super fun. And it's our favorite thing to do, to shoot with people, because the real feedback and getting to hear people's stories, I love to interact with people. And my brother and his wife have a new baby, and they came out, and I sat with that baby in our tent for like 2.5 hours, and he slept the whole time while people were shooting and didn't wake up once. There's no bang pop, like you don't feel it in your eardrum, you're not feeling it in your sinuses after you've shot, and that's a game changer for me.
Yeah, and I've shot with a lot of people from the firearms industry, or just people who've shot a lot hunting or military law enforcement. All of us have tinnitus. All of us have that. And the feedback that I've gotten, especially from like military who have had those long exposures, they say like gunshots for sure, but even certain suppressors irritate their tinnitus more. And that's because they're not attenuating the frequencies
Where the damage is.
And that's exactly what we're doing. We're attenuating the frequencies where the damage is. We're looking at the natural frequencies of the human ear. We're using the AHAAH algorithm to validate that. And we're designing a tuned system for the human ear out of a gunshot. So that's fundamentally what we're doing.
And we had a cool
everything.
Opportunity to measure this. We teamed up with Sandia National Labs and set up complex camera and recording systems. And there's an article about it that they released in January, and I'm going to link that in the show notes so you guys can go see that. And I think that the primary purpose behind this podcast is that we want to drive innovation across the industry. We want everyone to be better. We think that it's a great industry. We love the firearm industry, but if there is a way to do better, let's do better across the board. Everyone should adopt this, and everyone, if consumers, if you can understand it and you are driving your manufacturer of choice to, hey, I kind of like this.
You want to change it to where you're walking up and asking, hey, what's your ARU? So
100%.
And maybe we don't know everything. I don't know everything. Maybe there's something better out there. And we will find it, and maybe that has yet to be created. But this is one of the best systems that I've found in the development and in the approaching this like I would any other engineering problem throughout my career. This is the best system that we've found so far. And the reason that we're doing this, the reason that we got into this is we like to shoot. We're outdoorsmen. We have youth. And so like we started developing these suppressors and all this stuff kind of like right around the time when my kids started shooting a lot and started learning how to shoot and being old enough to do that. And I wanted a better shooting experience for them. I didn't care what the DB was. I didn't care about any of this. I wanted to give them the safest, best shooting experience that they can have. And it's a game changer. I'm telling you, especially with youth shooters or new shooters, you put them on a gun that fits them, the chassis that's the right size, and you give them and you put a suppressor on the gun, a very high performing suppressor. It's a game changer. They learn how to shoot so much faster. They learn how to shoot so much better because they're never afraid of the gun. They're not afraid of
pulling the
shock
trigger,
wave. They're not afraid of the sound. And it's amazing. We've done it with our children, and it's a huge difference in how they shoot.
I love, every once in a while we're at the range and you get someone that's like, I mean, it's still pretty loud. I can't really tell the difference. And then you take the can off and let them shoot without the can, and they feel the full impact and hear just everything that's behind one of these big guns. And we don't like to take small guns to the range. We're going to take a big gun to the range because we want you to really understand the impact that a can has. And
yeah, we've done all our testing on supersonic ammunition. So 5.56, we're running ball ammunition, shooting 3250 out of a typical AR. The 308 we shoot is 2850 out of a typical 308. Our 308 is out of a 20-inch 308. So the point is that we are shooting real cartridges, the stuff that you guys are going to shoot with, the stuff that you guys are going to hunt with. It's easy to make a subsonic bullet quiet. It's easy to make a rimfire quiet. And so like when I started this, I wanted the gun to be quiet that we were going to be hunting with, which is your 7 PRCs, it's your 6.5 PRCs, it's your 7 Rem mags, your 270s. That's what we do. That's where this whole thing is going from. So yeah, I don't know what else you want to add.
No, I think we should probably get close to closing. We've kept him hostage now for over half an hour, but we can nerd out on a lot of this for a long time. We probably will go a little more into depth into some testing processes and some videos. I don't know if it'll be a podcast, but definitely on our YouTube. But if you are keeping up with our American Legacy giveaway, which is up to 250 cans between 4th of July and the end of the year. You can get 2 entries for dropping us a comment on this podcast on your favorite platform. You can get another 2 entries for giving us a rating on this podcast. And specifically this one, help us grow, help people understand. We want to push this and we'd like for this education point to be something that we can get people talking about everywhere. But we appreciate you guys. This is why we do it.
Yeah. And obviously she's not giving you any points for listening to this, so I guess you just have to enjoy listening to it.
We have to listen to it to get to the end to find this out.
Oh, I see what you did there. All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys for listening, and drop us some comments, ask some questions. We'd be more than happy to have the discussion with anybody. And just tell us what you think, and tell us what you've experienced as well. And again, like we really want this to be something that is verifiable. We want to be something that you guys can look to and trust. And so again, ask the questions. We're more than happy to have the discussions with anybody who's wants to ask and wants to talk.
Absolutely. You guys have a good one.